4th, the first Tuesday in August. 3 months from today, or actually 3 months from yesterday in terms of the date, but the day of the week will be the fall election of 2020. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about so much on today's show. These are indeed interesting times. There's so much to get to in the world of sports. The NBA has started back playing. The Lakers last night clinched the #1 seed in the West. The Houston Rockets have gotten off to a great start with wins over Dallas in a game that went into overtime and saw the Rockets score 159 points. Yes, that is exactly what happened. And I'm trying to do a little something here because I have not been able to see comments from those of you on Facebook previously. So I'm trying to work on that. Anyway, as you join the show, I would ask you to please, if you will, share this video. And if you are watching this later, if you're watching the replay, you can share the video as well. So thank you guys for always supporting Chalk Talk and being a part of the show. I appreciate you being here. Otherwise, I'd just be talking to myself. So listen, a few things that I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the restart of the NBA. I want to talk about what's happening around the National Football League. And welcome to the people on YouTube. We are I'm trying to get the YouTube audience involved because now this show is also live on YouTube as well as on Facebook. So I enjoy that about the platform. And at any rate, I want to talk about the restarts of Major League Baseball, which has had some hiccups and road bumps, and the NBA, which so far has it's been working well. And if you've been watching the NBA games, drop in the comments and let me know how you think the league is doing. You know, there's no fans. They have the cutouts. They're piping in the noise. I think they've done a really good job of assimilating, of trying to, mirror the game experience as much as possible, right? With fans and noise and music. So I think the NBA has done a really good job with that. I mean, obviously it's not the same as having a stadium full of your home, of your fans, but it is indeed something that they've managed to work out. The Rockets team that I cover, I mean, I cover the entire league, but the team that I get to cover in person, in normal times, is the Houston Rockets. And they have looked really good. In the game against Milwaukee this weekend, there were thoughts that, the size is going to be an issue, right? Because they play small ball, and how are they going to match up with the likes of Giannis and some of the bigs on the Bucks? The Bucks got out early. The Rockets were able to come back. And listen, I realize that the Bucks are without a couple of players, but I think people around the league are saying, "Oh, wait a minute, this Rockets team may be something to really contend with." What Russell Westbrook has brought to this Rockets team is exactly what I'm sure Daryl Morey had hoped, and James Harden and those that really started this whole "let's get Russell here" movement. So, whoops. Okay, I didn't mean to do that. So it is indeed interesting time. So if you will, let me hear from you, drop some comments. And for those of you who were a part of last week's show and you sent comments and you said hello and you didn't hear from me until later, because for some reason during the show, I was not getting the comments live. So I don't know if I fixed that for today. So if I don't respond to you right away, it's because I am not seeing your comments. But we're going to talk about a lot, and your input is really important. Okay. One of the things that's happened is that all the NFL teams have reported to camp. There are still players who are opting out of the season. The deadline is, I believe, 4 p.m. Eastern on Thursday for NFL teams to for NFL players, if you will, to opt out of the season. Okay. One of the things that I read somewhere this week, there was a concern. No one really owned that concern, that there may be players who are opting out because to avoid maybe not making the teams. Of course, we've seen some players who clearly would be starting, who clearly would be a part of their team's future. But so we'll see. As of this morning, there have been 50 players who've opted out of the 2020 season. 8 of them were Patriots. That's the Patriots by far have the highest number of opt-outs in the league. And so the deadline is earlier than the original one the NFL and NFLPA had agreed upon. Initially, the deadline was to come 7 days after the two sides signed off on all of the amendments to the CBA to get the 2020 season off the ground. But the process of getting the two sides to actually finalize a deal, it took a while. So the league wanted to move up the date. So as it stands now, there are 2 ways an NFL player can opt out of the 2020 season after the 4 p.m. Eastern deadline on Thursday. One, a new diagnosis he has, a new diagnosis that he has one of the agreed upon high-risk conditions, or 2, and this is really unfortunate, a player's family member dies, is hospitalized, or otherwise moves to a medical facility because of COVID-19 or related condition. So if a player lives with someone who is a high-risk individual, he can request alternate housing that the team will pay for. The cost of that housing will count as a player benefit and be reflected on the salary cap. Obviously, there's some language here, but a player can opt out if a family member unfortunately dies because of COVID-19, or if someone in your home is later designated high risk. Will the league help you out? So there's questions about that. So there's a lot that has to be worked out, but these are, we keep saying it, these really are unprecedented times. And I think that some of this is really going to be a moving kind of target. Now, here's another little update I want to share with you. In the latest agreement with the NFL and the NFLPA, in addition to some of these changes from the practice squad to COVID testing, there's going to be a difference in terms of the salary cap. So they got what they would probably consider some pretty good news on the side letter that to the CBA. So they updated the discipline schedule, including fines and suspensions for high-risk COVID-19 conduct, such as going to clubs, bars, and house parties without PPE. All right. In the final deal, one of the things that has no longer been labeled high risk is church, which earlier was. So there's just a lot that is happening, and there's a lot to, if you will, really consider, right? Let me also do this. So yeah, I believe that, again, on the broadcast, I'm not able to see comments just yet. Oh, there we go. There's one. Good morning, Charles. Okay, so maybe I clicked something and that was better. So welcome to the show. Good morning. So those are some of the things happening around the National Football League. You've probably heard the stories about what's happening in Major League Baseball, right? In Major League Baseball, the Florida Marlins really made everybody kind of go, whoa, what's happening? They've had 19 players and staff and personnel test positive to COVID-19. And it brought up real concerns about how you operate outside of a bubble. So, while there is an expectation that there will be positive tests, Roger Goodell has said that, team coaches and general managers have said that they expect some tests, but what they're trying to do is to manage it as best as they can. They've put in a lot of different protocols in terms of safety. I know with the Houston Texans, they have, um, I don't want to say redone the building, but made a lot of changes and upgrades in terms of their protocols. They talked about new sanitation methods. They have facial recognition, so they've made it to where you don't have to touch as many things. They have multiple locker rooms, multiple meeting rooms, multiple places so that there's not a lot of congestion like before. Not that it was congested, but you were closer. I mean, you couldn't really maintain social distancing. So they've been working diligently on that. They also have this looks like an Apple Watch or some kind of watch, but bigger than the Apple Watch, that will alert you if somebody's getting close to you. So they have all of these things that are put in place to really try to offer um, to make it as safe as possible. They're doing testing, and the other thing is, you know, the other thing is they've got to trust each other, right? So last week I asked Deshaun in one of our Zoom press conferences about, as a leader, how do what do you say to players? How do you help make sure that players understand the importance of really, not doing what they would normally do, go to clubs and bars and, being around a lot of people, because they're not only risking themselves from being exposed and their families, but then the team, which then risk their family. So this is going to really require a lot of trust and a lot of camaraderie, if you will. So good morning, Kim Edwards. It's good to see you, my friend. I'm going to share an interview from last week on a Thursday when we had our Zoom conference with Bill O'Brien and Jack Easterby. My first time ever talking to Jack Easterby. He is the VP, Executive Vice President of Operations for the Houston Texans. And so, as I mentioned, it's been more than 2 months since the George Floyd murder that made everybody kind of stop in their tracks and then really hit the streets, right? It spurred a lot. And since then, we've heard, companies and organizations and sports teams and leagues say, we're with you, we're going to kneel, we get it. We're gonna operate differently. And I'm paraphrasing because everyone said something different. So I asked the question on Thursday, last week, and I guess it was Thursday, maybe it was Friday, and I want to share the interview with you that I played, from the question I asked, that I can't say it wasn't. Well, let me just play it. Hang on a second. Let me pull it up for you. Hope you guys are all doing well. Let me show it on the stream because I don't want you to miss it. Switch gears a little bit and talk about the social justice movement. I know there's been conversation about what Bill has talked about, supporting the players, and that you guys at some point will talk to the players about what you do. I want to talk about what the organization is doing just to make sure that the entire organization is embracing the movement and that there's more maybe diversity at your executive levels. Has there been conversation about any work in that space?
Absolutely. There's been tons of conversation. I think you've seen our owner, Cal McNair, lead that conversation by his series that they're doing called Conversations for Change. And we've had several conversations at the executive level between myself and Jamie and Amy and Susie and Bill, where we'll have conversations about, how can we continue to do better in this area? How can we continue to be educated? Because it starts with really being educated and learning how you can do better. And also, I think in sports in general, being aware of what's going on in sports from an opportunity standpoint. I think one of the things that I know Cal and Janice have been very committed to is opportunities, trying to find in our organization as many spots where real opportunities will be given to increase diversity and hopefully give us a chance to train and educate and bring in awesome, diverse candidates for multiple positions that can hopefully matriculate both up in our organization and also to other organizations as we're successful here in Houston. So I think Cal and Janice's commitment to diversity has been very, in my opinion, very intentional. And I'm excited about being a part of that. I think Bill and I are going to hopefully be a huge part of that with what we're doing in football.
And just one follow-up, thank you for that. How do you move beyond the conversations? Because maybe that wasn't the right question for me to ask, to where there's some action, right? Because it's been a few months since the world turned upside down. And I think the communities are getting a little weary of all the conversations and looking for actions. And so are there some action, is there some action on the horizon? Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you so much for that question, because that's exactly right. I think it does have to transition at some point. And I think, I can speak personally for myself, right? I've been so blessed by so many people who come from backgrounds that I did not come from in my life, who've really ultimately changed my life, who've molded me, who've challenged me. And a lot of times they've educated me on their backgrounds and their stances and things that are different than maybe the way I grew up or the way I was raised. And so I think it starts with conversation, as you mentioned, but then it transitions to them sharing their experiences and giving practical ways that their experience could have been improved, right? So friends or family or people that we've interacted with around our own sphere hopefully will educate us and give us practical ways. Hey, if this would have been different for me growing up, or if this opportunity would have been afforded to me, I maybe would have had a different experience. And that gives us the action item, right? Because that person can then tell us what specifically we should fund, or what specifically we should try to do to really make a difference. So I think for me, the conversations, we're in a time right now where a lot of conversations are happening, right? Everybody's virtual, so we can't get together as much as we wish. But my prayer is that we'll transition, hopefully, where we will have many face-to-face meetings and many programs that will come out of this education and this, let's just call it awareness, that we've been given over this last several months, especially here in Houston. And honestly, for me and my family, we couldn't be more excited about the McNair's commitment to diversity, where they are trying to make a difference in the community, and hopefully me and my family being a huge part of that as ambassadors for diversity.
Okay, so let me tell you that after we had that interview, the organization did send out an email that shortly thereafter, it listed a litany of things that they've done from 2019, from the beginning of 2018, let me rephrase that, through today. But those were player appearances and philanthropic efforts by the organization and the McNair Foundation and players. And let me say this, all of those things are great. That does not address what my concern is. And I bring that up to say, we have to make sure that we keep having, and we keep pushing the envelope, because I think there's an expectation that, things will go back to the way they were. And too much has happened. While George Floyd did not intentionally sacrifice his life for a movement and a people, we can't let what happened to him be in vain, right? The people who've been marching, the people who've been out. And what I've always said on this show is there is a role for everybody, even if it's just teaching your children, talking to your neighbors. Everyone's not going to march. Everyone doesn't have a platform to try to inform and educate and make people aware, but we can all have a role and do something. So when I asked that question the other day, and it was not a gotcha question, I wouldn't ask that of Deshaun Watson or JJ Watt, because they're not in really positions to do anything about that. And I followed up, and I had asked for an interview. And I will say this with all transparency, I have one of the things I've been doing is reaching out to people and organizations that I have any any kind of connection with. I did reach out and send a package to Roger Goodell. And I say a package because let me tell you, when I started my my career in television and we would send resume tapes out to stations to try to get jobs, I would always try to send my tape with something so it wouldn't come in the same kind of package as every other resume tape. Because if you go in a news director office, there'd be 200 tapes piled up against the wall, right? So when I sent a letter to Roger Goodell, I sent it in a box. You guys know I have a popcorn business, and I sent him some popcorn. So he received a box with my letter and also a handwritten note that told him what the popcorn was. Hey, thanks for reading my letter, and shared some real concerns and offered some suggestions. And never heard back from him. Okay. I did the exact same thing to Cal McNair of the Texans and never heard back, got any kind of response. And so I wondered if he received it, but I'm pretty clear now that he has. And so somebody has to push the envelope, right? I will tell you that I hope I continue to have access to the Texans. I can't tell you as I stand here today that I will because of questions that were asked after I asked my question, but I'm not going to stop, right? This is how I operated throughout my career, always respectfully, um, always informed. But if somebody doesn't press the envelope, doesn't say, hey, what's happening? What's going on? Where are we on this? Then nothing will happen. We have got to move beyond conversations. And so I start the show or share that on today's show because I'm encouraging you in the spaces where you are, keep moving. It's not about being angry and, um, whatever your approach is, that's not mine. Mine is, hey, listen, it's always with civility. It's always with definitely a high level of professionalism. And so I can't be accused of coming in and tearing down stuff, but we do have to tear down some walls. And if we don't make an effort to do that, then nothing will be different. On this show this spring, or I guess it was late winter because it was before the pandemic, I did a series of shows. And on each show, I talked about each professional organization in sports organization in Houston. And I showed you pictures of their executive team. All right. That was prior to the pandemic. That was prior to George Floyd's heinous murder. And what I showed you was an executive team of the Houston Texans that has absolutely no diversity in it. There are no African Americans on their executive team, none. And, that's just the truth. That's not an attack. That's their story, right? I didn't hire that team. And that is, to me, in football, not reflective of the community or the players in the league. So I just, I appreciate you guys supporting and following because as I can grow this platform, I am clear that if I were not here, I couldn't have the conversations I have. My boss would have gotten a call on Friday and said she shouldn't ask these questions. I already know how that works. I've been in this game more than 25 years. I get it. And I've sacrificed some opportunities to be able to have the voice I do. And that's not a pat myself on the back, but that is, where are you and what can you do? And maybe you can't in your workplaces, be incredibly outspoken, but maybe you can help other people. Maybe you can say, this is what's happening here. And from the outside, we need some help because inside, I have a family to support. This is what I do. I need your help. So a couple things. Let's not be critical of people who we feel like aren't doing enough from the inside. That's a difficult place to operate, right? I had a meeting with the general manager of the Four Seasons about a month and a half ago. We sit on a board together, and the organization, the board sent out a letter, and I followed up with him, and I said, I just want to tell you, I read the letter a couple of times, and I felt it was tone deaf. And here are some reasons why. And so here are some suggestions about how we can, not be so tone deaf. And he said, well, will you meet with me? And I said, absolutely. And so when our conversations and when we met, and I said, you can't expect the Black people in your organization to fix all of what is not necessarily right because they still have to work with you, and while you're saying, okay, yeah, tell me what you feel, Yeah. So I say all this to say is there is a lot of work to do. Good morning, Spencer Tillman. It's always good to see you. He says most professional sports organizations. Absolutely. Um, it is not just the Houston Texans. It is most professional sports organizations. And so we need to look at where what the leadership is doing, right? It is not just about having conversations with council members and and kneeling. Listen, I'm all fine with kneeling. They're 4 years a little late to the party, but come on, kneel. Okay, I think what the NBA has did that the NBA did recently was powerful as they opened their league. Last night, after the Lakers clinched the number one seed in the West, LeBron talked far less about the game and just kind of talked about the time. He talked about how when they kneeled in that first game against Toronto, they played two national anthems and they kneeled for over 4 minutes, how that was really uncomfortable. They had to switch knees. I mean, that was 4 minutes. It wasn't 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So, I mean, he continues to bring these conversations and to the forefront because we can never forget and we can never think that all is well. All right. And so I just encourage you to find out what you can do. Find out who you can support and continue to be educated and conformed about what's happening. Spencer also says that most organizations operate from a one-way and directional point of view. Therefore, they are reluctant to speak in terms of inclusion, not just diversity. Diversity is about numbers. Numbers can be reduced to a feckless function or quota. Alternatively, inclusion is about authentic power and influence. Absolutely, Spencer. And the word I've been using when I've had some meetings, the people who've actually granted me the access to not just say publicly, yes, we want to be in a different place. I use the word equity because diversity has become a number where you can check the box. It is about equity and inclusion. And if we are not willing to, you know, if that's not the conversation that's willing to be had, we got to look with, don't get caught up on the players make a lot of money. Just know if the players make a lot of money, that the people that are paying the players make a whole lot more. Let's not major in the minor, okay? It is about equity and inclusion. And so I welcome the opportunity to hopefully, I've asked for an interview with Cal McNair. I'm told that maybe he'll talk in the coming weeks. I was offered up another executive in the organization, didn't get that, but I'm not done. I have to continue to push forward. And here's what I say. I'm excited about the opportunity, and I'm trying really hard not to be discouraged, right? I've had a whole lot of setbacks in my career. So, for me, it's not a new place to be if people don't really want to talk to you and don't really want to work with you. I've lived this journey and I committed to it. And I talked with a colleague yesterday, not from the media industry, but a fellow business owner. We sit on a board together. We had a conversation and said, you know what, we may have to sacrifice some opportunities, but we cannot sit back and do and say nothing. Whether it's my alma mater, which is Texas A&M, that I would reach out to and say, hey, where are we? Or teams I cover, or boards that I sit on. It is not enough to just be in the room. So, Spencer, as always, I appreciate you. I hope that one day you'll join us on the show again soon, because I think your voice is important. But I also, I think now these platforms are important, right? It's not about going rogue, but it is about talking about things beyond the X's and O's. I can sit down and talk to you about X's and O's all day long. I think if you follow me throughout my career, you know that. But that's why I always say Chalk Talk is about more than just sports. Okay. It is about the bigger picture of life. And sports is really a microcosm of society. I've said that forever. I've told you guys that's one of the things I love about it. And so it is not enough to just for me to tell you about the X's and the O's, about Deshaun's, will Deshaun get a new contract? I'm sure they're working on it. We haven't heard anything. Patrick Mahomes got a major deal. That's awesome. That's amazing. He then in turn purchased a piece of the Kansas City Royals. That's important. Ownership, equity, right? And so I just want you to, I ask you to continue to show up here with me. And if you will tell people about what we talk about here, and to be a part of the conversation, because we cannot, and we want to have, as Spencer said, inclusion, which is about authentic power and influence. We can't wait for somebody to say, you know what, for decades and decades, we haven't really been inclusive. Just come on, be a part of the party. That's not how it works. That isn't a part of how it works. And I will tell you that every time I've been a part of these conversations in other organizations, what they show us, okay, well, here's what we've done in procurement. Nope, I'm talking about your executive team. I'm looking at the inequity here and the lack of inclusion and where African Americans get stuck. Maybe we come in ascend to the mid-level manager position. That's where many of us get, and then we stop. And so one of the things I offered to the general manager of the Four Seasons, who I think by all accounts is a very nice man, I asked him, I said, are there any Black general managers of hotels in the Houston area? I mean, you're chair of the board of the Convention Bureau, are there? And he said, no. I said, well, that's not good. But what if the general managers of the hotel personally mentored a mid-level manager and helped him or her navigate the process of getting to that, coveted role of general manager, getting to the C-suite, right? Understanding how to navigate the relationships, because that's a huge part of that next step, and advocate for them. We need somebody advocating for us. Can you think about, I think about if I never had someone advocating for me, how things may be differently. So advocate for those mid-level Black managers who get to a place and can't ascend any higher because the rules kind of change. And so those are the kind of conversations to bring you up to date on what I'm doing. Okay. And so as it is important to talk about how teams are preparing, how many players are going to end up opting out because of COVID-19. Because remember, we're managing two pandemics. We are, right? We're managing the pandemic of coronavirus, which is real, it's surging, it's deadly, and we have a total lack of leadership at the national level. Doesn't matter what party you're in, that's just the truth, right? We need a national strategy, right? Because as a doctor who joined us a few weeks ago, Dr. Burley said, it's like we're in a group project. And so everybody's got to be doing the same thing. And we're not doing that as a nation. So as one part of the country gets better, the other part gets worse. And then it makes everybody get worse. And then parts of the country that were doing better before, and it flattened the curve and got to the other side, then it starts to move back. We need a national strategy. We need leadership. Okay, we don't have it. So what do we do right now? Mask up and try to stay socially distanced. You don't have to be any place, stay at home. Luckily, I enjoy myself because it's just me. I do spend time with my family. That is the exception I make, which is why I'm super careful about who I'm around, because I would not want to do anything to impact the health of my mother, who is 89 years old, or my siblings who are all older. So I am really cautious. I've had people say, hey, you want to meet out for a drink? And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. You want to go to dinner? I'm like, eat inside a restaurant? Nah, no, I'll pick up something, but I need to be in an environment that I have some control over, that I know what's happening. So I encourage all of you to continue to stay safe, wear your mask, practice social distancing. And listen, some of us can't do that. We have to go to work. Many of us are on the front line, and you got to go out and you've got to be in the stores, or your first responders, or your essential workers, or your healthcare workers, and we appreciate that. But the rest of us, let's try to do our part. John Williams said, I contacted the Texans through friends I worked with in the past and no response. I also reached out to Belinda Lerner, executive director of the NFL, and no response, consider suggestions to bring back Cap to a team after the apology from Goodell to Cap on his reasoning for kneeling. I also gave suggestions for more diversity in the NFL, more head coaches, more general managers for team. No response, but I did read that Goodell did try to get owners to give Cap a shot to return, and later they did come up with a strategy to begin to be more diverse in the hiring process of coaches as a whole. So thank you for sharing that, John. I appreciate it. So let me tell you where I am on the cap thing. Clearly he was blackballed. And is good enough to play in the league. For me, it's really about more than cap. And now that the league is saying, okay, good morning, Carolyn. Welcome aboard. Thank you, as always, for being a part of the show. We got it wrong, right? There's a problem. And I don't really know how they navigate that. I mean, if Cap gets a job, great. He deserves an opportunity. But for me, am far less focused on that. He is one man who has given up a lot, but I would venture to say he's gained a lot. In terms of, not that it wasn't hard and he didn't make sacrifices, which may not have been his initial intent when he just started his peaceful protest. But, I'm sure that he has, we know he's gotten support from organizations. Ava DuVernay is about to do a story, I think a docuseries about him and his journey. If I have that right, I think it's a docuseries, the Nike deal and other deals. And so while Cap started the conversation about the kneeling and clearly was blackballed, we haven't really heard from very many owners. You heard Jack Easterby talk about Cal McNair. I saw a video with Cal and a former player, Travis Johnson, on Facebook. But and Cal's not a player that's addressed has been out front very much. But here's the thing: sometimes we all have to move beyond what's comfortable for us. I know I do. I have to do that all the time. Is it really comfortable to contact the owner of the team that you cover and know that could ultimately result in them saying, never mind, she don't need to cover us? I mean, I know that's a possibility. I'm not saying that that's what they'll do, but it is sometimes we have to do things that are a little uncomfortable. When I have to contact people and say, hey, listen, you said these things and this is what's happening. Can we talk about it? So I say that to say at some point, Cal McNair may have to do something that's not very comfortable for him, which is to talk publicly. And not just him, owners across the league. It is not going to be enough for Roger Goodell, who is the head of the league, but he does not own the teams. And I need people to understand that Roger Goodell works for the owners. He answers to them. It's a very good job, right? It's a lot of power, he makes a lot of money, he got a lot of perks, but he answers to the owners. And those are the men and women that we need to hear from, that have the ability and the authority to make whatever kind of changes and decisions can be made, right? And so hopefully I'll get a chance to have an audience with him. Or even on the other side of the organization, Jamie Roots. That was fine. Absolutely. Let's talk. And this isn't it's a civil conversation. What's happening? What's going on? What's the process? And the idea that we're talking about it. I mean, what's taking so long? Why aren't there people in the organization at the executive level that look like the players? And it's not about just giving somebody a job because it's some kind of an affirmative action move. There are qualified, talented people across the board. And the complexity of the Texans and what I showed you with the Texans was their executive team. I didn't show you the changes in their scouting department. It is not enough. And so just know that I will continue to ask the questions and to press the envelope and hopefully continue to have the access, but not having the access won't keep me from using my voice. And so you guys keep showing up. I'm going to keep showing up. And if you'll encourage other people to show up, I'd appreciate that. Charles says the commitment of meaningful change by the NFL is expected, considering the ownership of teams and the history of the league. They are not worthy of our support. Neither are their advertisers worthy of our support. The players need to address this through their union and individually. We need to support such an effort. They will not do anything meaningful unless we force them and others to. You know, Charles, I appreciate that. I know you've had that position and that you've stopped watching the league. As I know many that watch that participate in Chalk Talk have since the cap has been out of the league. Um, and as long as the leagues are still making money, okay, they will continue to operate the way they want to make money. And you know, so in terms of what the players should address, I'm not really, you know, I go back and forth about this. I have a conversation, had a conversation with Zena, and I talked about the difference in the players I covered today and the players I covered earlier in my career. It's a different day, right? There's not, while there's a certain awareness, there's not, you know, if this is your livelihood, this is what you've trained and worked your whole life to do, to expect that they would just be willing to give it up, because that's always a possibility, right? There are, I mean, I think we all know that the players that we see at the professional level, they're the players that don't get there. It's not just because they don't have any talent. They don't have the talent to compete at that level, right? Any more than seeing me here and not seeing me on a national network doesn't mean that I don't have the talent to be there. It doesn't mean I was blackballed. I'm not trying to say that at all, but you know, opportunity and timing and all of that's a part of it. So, you know, I don't know that we can expect players to give up their livelihood, a livelihood that's very short lived. I mean, we can say, oh, it'd be great, but they're not all going to do that, right? There are not a lot of people that would take the move that Cap took. You know, they're not a lot. There's not a lot of people that would take the move with other players that we've seen. And I don't know that it's. I struggle with whether we should expect that of them. What we should expect is their support, right? But we can't expect them to do things that may cause them to lose their livelihood. So I have that conversation with some of my people, some of my friends all the time, and I'm like, yeah, you know. Charles has another good point. He says, "Hey, thank you. Listen, I'm led by what I believe is right, and so I appreciate you for saying that. But it is, I don't really know any other way." Charles brings up an interesting point, and we talked about that on this show. Curt Flood gave up his career for meaningful change in Major League Baseball. The players have power; they are unified. We all are, right? So Curt Flood, of course, is kind of the father of free agency, and he did give up his career for something that has changed the lives of players, the lives and the finances for players for years to come. Um, but you know, that's a lot, and you know, especially in football when the careers are so short lived. So it's like, am I going to risk this right now for, I mean, we see some careers that are long. I mean, Tom Brady is an enigma, right? You don't really play till you're in your 40s as a quarterback. And there are some players who have lengthy careers. You know, the average they say is 3 to 5 years, and depending on position could be less. We know that guaranteed contracts are not the same in the National Football League as they are in other leagues, and so it is about their livelihood and their future. So I get that. In terms of what we can expect them to do. But it is a partnership. Like if they can continue to partner with community and do what they can where they will, I think that should be the expectation. And here's the other thing. We need the media to do its job, right? And I mean that not so much just in sports, but across the board, right? I saw a clip about a week ago of Barbara Walters with an interview from maybe back in the 2000, early 2000s, maybe late 90s, where she was interviewing then just regular citizen Donald Trump. And he talked about, you know, he mentioned, he floated the whole fake news thing. And she stopped him and called him on it and said, well, but you said this, and this, and that's not true. And what about this? I mean, we don't have a lot of that, right? Because there's so much, I want to be liked, and I want to, and I don't mean so much just the reporters and producers and anchors, but management, And so who are the people who are willing to push the envelope, ask the questions, have the voice. You're going to be ostracized, perhaps not have quite the access. It's more difficult. And even in that road, right? So I'm saying that to say the journey is real, but we can all have a part in it. Whether you support me or you support somebody else who's doing something independently, but bringing you solidly, good information, um, support them however you can, so that we can have these independent voices that can do some of the work that others may not be able to do just because of the positions they're in. Now, there are a few out there who are, getting it done, asking the questions, and I'm not trying to say everybody in mainstream media is somehow a schlep. Okay, uh, it is, but it is difficult when you work with somebody. I will tell you guys this. Um, One of the conversations I had with the local executive when we met, and I shared some thoughts about, hey, I kind of see some flaws in where you are and where you could be. And here are just some suggestions, because I'm never going to come and say, hey, Charles, what you're doing is not, I don't think it's a good idea if I don't have any suggestions. I think that's just not how I operate. Okay. And so, he was appreciative and told me, man, you make a great employee for someone. I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And I know that he thought that was a compliment. Okay. Just like when I left being vice president of the Super Bowl in 2004, and my chairman, who thought a lot of my efforts and my works, wanted to help me find a job. And I said, well, I want to help him build a business. He said, well, I want to help you find a job. Yeah. Um, Yeah. It is an interesting, it's like, you're great, Kim. You have a lot to offer. You would be a great employee for somebody. And he wasn't trying to be offensive or be insulting. He had no idea. I said, no, because I wouldn't be able to have this conversation with you if I worked for somebody. And I'm really, really aware of that. And the problem, the unfortunate thing is, he didn't realize it. So there's a place for all of us. John said, you're so right. I went there first. The owners make the major decisions for the teams, and that is somewhat of the problem. Look at what happened with the Clippers owner, um, that did what he did, in the NBA response to that owner. There needs to be a shift in how the NFL is governed and how decisions are made in these types of situations that arise, such as Kaepernick being ousted by the league for a worthy and just cause. Um, Great point, John. I think it's right. But here's the thing: a lot of what happens in the NBA too is, I mean, Adam, David Stern before him, and now Adam Silver. But it is also, who owns those teams. Are there any Mark Cuban type personalities in the National Football League? You looked at Mark Cuban's executive team. He has a lady that works for him, who's an executive VP, named Cent Marshall. She's been really active in the D&I space, diversity and inclusion, what I have to call equity and inclusion. Black woman. I think she came over from AT&T. I'm not sure. Has ascended even higher as one of the top people in the organization. But it's not just her. There are others. Who are the Mark Cubans in the National Football League? I don't know. I don't know that there are any. And here's the other thing. It's got to start at some point with ownership, right? There's got to be some ownership. And understand this, the owners get to decide who gets to be an owner. So it is going to require a consistent and constant and an ongoing effort to create some equity, so that, as Spencer said earlier, that there can be some real power and influence, because that's really what it's about. Charles says, I saw that interview. Media has given up much of their responsibility for revenue. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, there are a lot more opportunities. There are individual platforms, which allows me to do what I do, right? But by the same token, back in the day, there were three options for television. I'm not suggesting that we go back to that, okay? revenue wasn't an issue, right? They were basically printing money because you had these three options. And so it changed everything. You're absolutely right. But there's got to be a balance. I believe that you can have revenue. I believe that there are some companies that are conscious and conscientious. I mean, let's look at what happened with Facebook. You know, Facebook didn't exactly decide to be better corporate citizens until some of the advertisers said, we out. We're not doing this with you. And hold up. Facebook says, wait a minute, let's revisit some things. We are going to, okay, we're going to do some, we're going to operate a little differently. It is always about the revenue, right? Good morning, Melanie Porter Hogan. Thank you for being here. It's great to see you. And thank you for sharing the broadcast. I appreciate that. Charles says, I resemble that remark. um, they are billionaire clubs just as it is. Yeah, you know, we're talking about the ownership. You know, it is, you know, you guys get it. And so we need to keep having these conversations. So Melanie says, great conversation. Got to get back to say, listen, you do what you need to do. You can catch the replay, but thank you for being a part of today's show. Exactly. And that's the thing too. I mean, a lot of you guys join me live. I appreciate it. I don't know what happened last week, but I didn't get to get any of your messages until after, and I try to respond to everybody. So whenever you can watch Chalk Talk, just do it. And I'm actually going to make a push for some greater support again, and just say, hey, listen, we have conversations here about sports. We have them about social justice. We have them about current events. It's necessary. We have an audience that cares about the issues, and we need your support so that we can continue to grow the platform, right? I mentioned to you at the top of the show, we're almost out of time, which is why I didn't want to have a guest today, because I wanted to be able to have this conversation in depth with all of you. Listen, people, it's almost time to vote. In some states in September, early voting will start. So there's a few things I like to leave you with. I like to leave you with actionable items, all right? Reach out to your congressional leaders, senators, and your congresspeople, men and women, and let them know that you support the U.S. Postal Service. I need y'all to buy some stamps. I need you to use the post office, okay? I know it's easy to do things online. Send somebody a card, right? Drop me a note if you want to. Emails are great, but use the Postal Service. The Postal Service is under attack, and that is because we know the president doesn't want there to be any mail-in votes, right? And for instance, my mother has been voting absentee for years. She's 89 years old. So my sister and I were talking the other day, and we said, okay, in this last election, she got her early ballot, but she got it late. Her absentee ballot, she got it late. So my sister dropped it off at the polling location. So that's what we're going to do. My mom's going to fill out her ballot when she gets her absentee ballot, and we're going to take it to the polls because you can do that. We got to get ready to vote, people. I know we always hear this is the most important election of your lifetime. If you do not believe that, then you just keep listening to this show, and I hope that you will get it. I mean, you have to know. What is it? 150,000 Americans dead? Has the number risen? I haven't watched the news at all today. I don't know what the number is, but it's not good. And you know, doctors say, I heard an infectious disease doctor speak just last week. And so the question was put to him is, when do you think we'll get to the other side of this virus? You know what he said? June of 2021. Now, no, he doesn't have a crystal ball. And so when the host asked, she said, wait a minute, that's June. He said, well, what's happening today to make things better? What's the national strategy? You know, that's a good question. It's a group project, people, and we don't have a strategy nationally to get to the other side. The best we can do is wear a mask, practice social distancing, wash your hands, try to stay away from crowds. And we have people that won't even support that. So until we have new leadership, vote in November, okay? There's not going to be much different, right? You know, there's not. There's not going to be a lot different. Unemployment is run out for a lot of people. The support to keep people from being evicted from their homes is run out. Congress is bickering. Half of them are doing nothing. and the president wants a payroll tax cut. What? People are hurting. They can't pay their bills. They're trying to feed their families. They're trying to stay alive. I mean, there's so much to be concerned about. We have got to vote, and just know that if you have to vote and stand in line, wear your mask. If you got to wear gloves, we just got to do it. It's not optional. And if you listen to somebody that tells you it doesn't matter, I'm just going to encourage you not to listen to them. Like, listen to somebody else, because that's not the kind of conversations we should have. Make sure you're registered, okay? And here's the other thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to wrap up because we're almost at the top of the hour. Make sure you're registered, and make sure you know where your polling location is, because they've moved a lot of polling locations. The place I voted for the past, I've bought this place 17 years. And in the primary, I voted there in March. And the runoff last month, it was closed. I got no notification. And that was a place that a lot of people voted. I mean, I found someplace else, obviously, but that's why it is important to register to vote and make sure that the place that you vote is open, and find that out in advance, because the day of, that's how they get us, right? Make sure you're registered, that your name's on the roll, and make sure you know where to vote. All right, everybody, thank you so much for enduring my conversation today. It's important that we have these chats. I will have a guest for you next week. I'm still working on getting the athletic director from Vanderbilt. Hopefully it'll work for her schedule. She said that she will join us, so I'm still working on that. I have another guest I'm going to bring you that I think you'll enjoy. But I'll tell you about that throughout the week. Look for the updates. And as always, do something kind for yourself and do something kind for somebody else. Wear your mask, practice social distancing, and wash your hands. Have a great week, everybody. Stay safe. Thank you for being a part of Chalk Talk. I'll see you next week.